All right, all right. Hey, folks, welcome to another DNA Co webinar. And we got another gooder for you guys tonight. I think that the quality of our aging is really dependent on this marriage, right, between genetics and epigenetics. And the more that we can sort of harness our environment to impact our biology, the better we can influence biological aging and consequently stay super duper sexy all the way up until the end. So, tonight we're going to dive into some of these genetic considerations and really just help give some guidance as to how you can use this info to impact your quality of life and how you look and how you feel and how you perform over the long term. So, what could be more important than that? And here to discuss this with me is the all powerful Dean of the DNA University and just all around boss babe, Dr. Laura Varden. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for that very sweet introduction. For all of you who may be new to us, my name is Dr. Laura Varden. I'm Dean of the DNA University and an in-house clinician here at the DNA Company. And I'll tell you, Justin is an absolute amazing practitioner. He's one of our rock stars here at the DNA Company and has helped to transform so many people's lives in optimization, longevity. So you've got a great co-host here tonight to give you some fantastic tips, tricks, and information that we can help you to stay hot.
Yes, and thank you
80
so
and
much.
beyond.
All right, so before we dive into all that, and first of all, thank you, Dr. Laura, for the compliments there as well. We are going to dive into the poll as well. So we asked you guys a handful of questions just to kind of get a read on you. So if Vanessa in the background wouldn't mind pulling that up, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Excellent. So it looks like that more than half of you have said that longevity and health span are the aspects of aging that you'd like to support most. And, honestly, that really is such a major thing nowadays, that we want to live not just longer, but have a healthier years in that longevity. So I love to see that. And that was followed up by energy and strength. And to be honest, when you're talking about not just longevity, but that health span, energy and strength is part of it. And those are really great indicators of having good longevity. So wonderful to see that. Our next question actually is split a little bit more evenly, that the majority of you find that both exercise and sleep are the most difficult habits to maintain. Absolutely. Our environment is constantly changing, what we are being exposed to, stresses. But I'll tell you, it is so much easier to follow and have those things be more consistent and regimented when you have the energy, the strength, and when you have a partner, when you have someone, that accountability, whether it be, a practitioner or a friend that can help you with that exercise, that nutrition, stress management, which can help to lead to better sleep. So they really are very much integrated. All right, our third question. Overwhelmingly, you all answered that no, that you have never had skin irritation with skincare products that appeared to be high quality. And that's really wonderful. Unfortunately, there was still, quite a few of you who said, yeah, I did. And this is where you need to learn how to interpret the ingredients. And we're going to be talking about a site, ewg.org. That's the Environmental Working Group, to give you a little sneak peek into what we're going to be talking about. And I know we've mentioned that incredible group and site before because it is so fantastic. But knowing that it's not just about the price or them saying, hey, this is the best quality, but actually knowing what goes into it. And is this good for my skin, for my body? And our fourth question, we have the majority of you said a mix of both when you talk about or think about lifestyle choices having the influences on aging and genetics. Like which one, aging, or I mean, lifestyle choices or genetics. And it's beautiful to see that the majority are saying a mix of both, because absolutely, it's about that foundational genetics as well as the epigenetics, the expression of those genes. They really go hand in hand. And that's also where the nature versus nurture comes in. So, very much intricately tied together. And our final question, and here we've gotten overwhelming, where the majority of you said all the above when it comes to how would you like aging support to feel. We want it to feel simple and sustainable. We want to have low effort, high impact. There's nothing wrong with being lazy in the fact of not having to do a whole bunch more that you don't have to get great results. And finally, making sure that that information is guided by your DNA and functional labs. So you are in the right place. We are going to be talking about all this stuff. And I really do, actually, we all do very much appreciate you answering these polls. Thank you.
Yeah, and we appreciate that a lot. It helps us guide our conversation a little bit. And one thing that we're also going to be doing tonight, which is a little bit new on these webinars, is we're actually we've got a PowerPoint ready to go. We've been dabbling in that a little bit because I know that the note-taking process can be a little bit difficult on these webinars. There's a whole lot of alphabet soup that we've got to say, right? All the different genes are, they might as well be barcodes, right? And we're talking little letters and numbers, and it just gets a lot more confusing. So we're going to start to pull up some PowerPoints and utilize that a little bit more in our presentations. Let us know in the chat if that's helpful for you. And if so, we'll continue to do so. And without further ado on that note, if Vanessa in the background wouldn't mind pulling up, there it is. Beautiful. Very well done as well. So thank you a lot for that, team. Okay, so how to stay hot until you're 80 years old. That is the topic of tonight. Next slide, please, and we will get on into it. Beautiful. All right, so let's start with fitness here. Now, fitness is very interesting, right? Because exercise is a hormetic stress. So when we do it correctly, it creates adaptations that are anti-aging. But when we do it wrong, right, it can actually accelerate aging. So, posture and bone density and mitochondrial biogenesis and improved circulation, human growth hormone release, all of these things are benefits of properly implemented exercise. But overtraining, right, it can create oxidative stress and HPA axis overactivation, nervous system dysregulation, sleep disruption, carb cravings, you name it. And there's some genes here that are pretty relevant for this conversation as well. Like we talk about things like the SOD2 pathway. There is the TCF7L2, which really influences how your body kind of orchestrates the insulin mechanism. And one of our new genes is called MTNR1B. And that's part of the new panel, right? So we've got the upgraded panel. And this one has a lot to do with the melatonin receptor, and it's involved in circadian regulation of insulin secretion, right? So this kind of pairs really well with the TCF7L2 gene. And it's pretty well established that, risk variants are going to create higher fasting glucose and predispose you to things like type 2 diabetes, as it kind of shifts melatonin signaling in the pancreatic beta cells, and it makes insulin release slower and less robust. So especially when it comes to that late night eating or circadian disruption, this can make it so that people get those glucose spikes so they don't want. So this is one of those considerations. Dr. Laura, what other genes do you think are of relevance for the fitness conversation?
Well, definitely when we're talking about the strength, balance, mobility decline without stimulus. Okay, so for that, in this can happen in people with less efficient androgen signaling or muscle fiber mitochondrial support. So, for example, this would be patterns that would involve the AR gene, which is the androgen receptor. This is actually an X-linked gene, which means that this gene is only found on the X chromosome, what you get from your mother. So, if you are male, you have an X and a Y. Therefore, you'll only see one allele in your report. If you're a female, you'll see two. There's also the SHBG. This is the sex hormone binding globulin gene, and this helps and works through that binding of free testosterone. How much are you going to be have available? Now, this can be attenuated, meaning it can be adjusted based on diet, lifestyle, different things like that, but it's a good indicator of what's going on. There's also the ESR1 gene, there's oxidative stress genes. So this would be like your SOD2, that superoxide dismutase gene, catalase gene, which is a new gene in our antioxidation pathway, along with GPX, our glutathione peroxidase gene. So you'll find those in the anti-inflammatory reports. And then there's assessments that you can look at. So those definitely influence when we're talking about strength, balance, mobility, because when you have issues with these genes, or you remember they work as a team, this decline can show up earlier, especially if someone is sedentary. And I gotta say, I was just listening to a medical podcast this past weekend, and they were saying that there was a couple of studies that were done looking at smokers and looking at people who are sedentary and people who exercise, and then combinations of them. And they found having a sedentary lifestyle was as detrimental as a smoker, even if they didn't smoke. When you think about the cardiovascular, cardiorespiratory health of someone, that you can have that much of a detrimental effect just by being sedentary. Wow. I mean, that right there should make you want to just get up and do something, even if it's for a walk, even if it's just doing some, squats, just air squats, those little exercise snacks. So move your body. It is that important.
Yeah, and I think that, when the genes, like they really act as guiding principles for prioritization as well. Because if you know that, let's say, you do have a suboptimal androgen receptor, well, then you can sort of zoom out on the way that you work out and you can tailor it a little bit more toward hormone optimization, right? Which unfortunately for a lot of people means you got to do more leg exercises and, bigger deadlifts and squats and things like that, because that's going to get a lot of that testosterone pulse. But let's say you have suboptimal, GPX and SOD2, like you said. Well, if you're doing a heck of a lot of cardio, then that means that you're actually having more of a pro-aging effect on your cells. And you're going to want to add some interventions in there to help clear free radicals quicker. So it's one of those things, right, where it's like, the genes, you look at your lifestyle and you combine the two and you make alterations. That's a lot of what functional genomics is I call it alignment with your assignment, right? You're assigned these genes, and it's like we need to operate in such a way as to amplify the positive effects and maybe downgrade some of the negative characteristics of having those genotypes. So know your genes and then look good in your genes, right? That's what we say.
Nice. And it's really important. And I know this is one of the things that most people in our poll had mentioned that is the most difficult to have for consistency, and that is the exercise. But it's not in the perfection. It's just in the consistency, and consistency beats that intensity every time. Aging slows when movement is regular and tailored to your hormonal, cardiometabolic, and recovery profile that you can find in your DNA 360 reports, that you can do this. And this is where I was saying in the beginning, it makes it that much easier when you have an accountability partner, when someone is there doing it with you or making sure that you do it, just to kind of cheer you on and let you know you're not alone. It is that important.
Absolutely. So, I mean, fitness is pure epigenetics, right? This is the way that we move, and this can have a significant impact on the way that you age. And other areas that are also very important will be in the next slide. So, Vanessa, if you wouldn't mind transitioning to the next one, there we go. So yeah, nutritional alignment, right? That word alignment is one of my top favorite words in the English language because it really sums up what we're talking about. And the alignment with your assignment that I mentioned, a lot of that is food, right? If we eat 3 times a day, I think it's a good idea to look at that as 3 opportunities every day to provide your cells with the highest quality information possible and the right information possible, right? Because different types of food will interact with your physiology different than it might for somebody else based on your enzyme activity, based on your genes. So, food is also pure input and epigenetics, and it has a really big impact on how your body ages because it exists on such a crazy spectrum, right? Like food, especially in 2026, can be absolute medicine and it can actually be complete poison and everything in between. So there's a lot of extremity now when it comes to what food can and should do for you. And long term eating mismatched to your biology, like it says on the slide here, can create that inflammation. It can accelerate aging and weight gain. So, again, understanding your insulin genetics, understanding your liver detoxification genetics, your macronutrient genetics with ApoA2 and AMY1. All of these genes are of significant relevance. And I'll say that the upgraded reports have some added things in there as well that are very important, right? Now we have genes like the taster gene, which has to do with like your response to bitter foods, which is really interesting that some people can't deal with certain veggies nearly as much. It just tastes more bitter based on this taster gene. Dr. Laura, I mean, what are some other ones? ApoA5 here for triglycerides is
Oh,
mentioned.
yeah.
There's so many new ones
Yeah,
we're
because actually, we have really expanded the genes when we are talking about fat handling, the triglyceride, cholesterol patterns. So, ApoA5 being one of them. And this gene influences how efficiently triglycerides are cleared from the bloodstream. And if you happen to have a risk variant, that's linked to higher triglyceride levels and increased cardiometabolic risk. There are some others, some of our newer genes as well, which are the FADS1 and 2 genes. Now, we look at these collectively, and these genes can, especially in the variants, can reduce how efficiently your body converts plant-based omega-3s, and we're talking about the ALA from foods like flax or chia into long-chain omega-3 fats, EPA, DHA. So, when you start seeing risk alleles in some of these genes or in this haplotype, because again, we look at it as a group, they're usually associated with higher precursor levels, lower downstream omega-3s, and even a stronger nutritional case for getting the EPA, DHA directly from fatty fish or supplements. And we're going to be diving more into supplements in tomorrow night's webinar. We're really going to be focusing on supplements for longevity. So, that along with the other genes that we already cover from our legacy genes. So we're talking ApoE, okay? If you have, say you have an ApoE3, if you have an ApoE4, that works into it. We also have ApoA2, which is associated to fat gain from fat consumption. All of these things really play a part in, what do I eat? How do I eat? Because when we're talking about healthy foods, they are not universally healthy. For example, high carb, clean diets can be problematic for those with poor carbohydrate tolerance. While very high saturated fat intake can actually accelerate issues in those with certain lipid patterns, like the genes that I just talked about. So, knowing your DNA 360, knowing your genetic patterns, your DNA blueprint is absolutely phenomenal to really personalize what you need to do to have healthy eating, healthy lifestyle, how your plate should look, and also how you should eat, because that also works into that mood and behavior aspect to the information that your brain is getting from your gut. We were actually the first bullet point in that second section, appetite and satiety. Leptin is a hormone. It's one of our hunger hormones. And actually, leptin is the hormone that says, hey, we're full. Okay, we don't need to eat. Ghrelin is the other hunger hormone. That's the one that's like, I'm ravenous. I'm really hungry. I always remember it. I don't know if you guys are old enough. If you remember the movie Gremlins, I always relate gremlins to ghrelin signaling because absolutely voracious. You want to eat everything. Where leptin, that satiates and it's like saying, I'm fine. So you really want to have those levels balanced so you're not overeating and having issues.
Yeah, it's really funny that you mentioned that because when I was originally going through the functional genomics certification,
Mhm.
that's how I started to remember some of these different genes was to kind of make little funny things in my head about it. Like I remember, so we have a gene associated with lactose tolerance and it's called MCM6. So I
Mhm.
remember when I was studying, I broke it down to MCM6 was like my cow's milk. So it
Mhm.
made me think about milk and
There
lactose, and
you
that's
go.
how I remembered it. And there was a whole list of little like weird mental tricks that I had. One of the things I love about some of these genes too that we've added in is that it can kind of be explanatory for oddities in blood work and labs where you're just like, what the heck is that coming from? Like I've had clients that are on like what I would consider a really healthy, like paleo diet, and they've got this major imbalance with omega 3 and 6. And again, those fads genes that can really explain that because they're on a paleo diet. So then there's the hemp parts and there's olive oils and they're eating almonds and different things. And it's like again, on paper, this would appear a perfectly healthy diet, but why is there so much omega 6 issue going on here when they've cut out the seed oils? Right? These are not the people eating margarine and just processed carbohydrates that have added this and added that. But again, if you have suboptimal genes associated with omega conversion, that can show you where, okay, we need to actually cut out some of these even healthy plant oils and replace them and do more of a maybe a pescatarian approach or something, right? Get some more animal sources of omega 3s in there. So these genes can really be of relevance as well for just dialing in your diet, understanding your labs, why they look the way they look. And there's a lot of that in the new genes, right? We have genes associated now with TNF alpha, CRP, interleukins. I mean, they can
Mhm.
explain a lot of oddities on your labs as well. So it's a cool little thing that we've added.
Yeah, and before we go to the next slide, I want to mention, I want to double click on skin quality. That's really important. When you look at someone, you notice their skin. If they have, very old wrinkly skin, they look older. You want to have more of that smooth, hydrated, supple looking skin. And this is really important. And actually, that's one of the reasons why we had put that in the poll question about, products, high quality skin products. But first and foremost, good skin, healthy skin really comes from the inside out. Is your body hydrated? Are you drinking enough water? Are you taking in enough electrolytes to give your body the energy? Are you having collagen, vitamin C? Vitamin C is very important for collagen synthesis. There are so many different things that you can do to help with your skin, not just on the outside. So, making sure that your detox pathways are properly supported, that you are getting those vitamins, that you are getting those polyphenols, those antioxidants. So that way you are supporting all of the cells in your body, including these skin cells. So that way you are removing those toxins, removing those things that make skin look older from the inside out. And then when we're talking about topical or something from the outside that you are helping your skin, we mentioned about some products, okay? EWG.org, Environmental Working Group, has wonderful verified products that don't have those nasty toxins. And you can always check to see if your products that you are currently using have toxins in them by going onto their website, and you can actually type in your product and it will spit back and let you know, hey, these toxins are in there, and it'll give you a rating on that. So, and then it will, offer some, better products that are verified that you can choose from. But also, getting some sunlight, obviously not too much because that can age you, but you need some sunlight, help with the vitamin D and just, that nice light glow. Justin, what are some skincare things, routines that you use to help make your skin look wonderful?
Oh gosh, this topic is near and dear to me. I had such a long, brutal history of skin problems
Mm.
ever since my literal 13th birthday. And I went on antibiotics. I went on something horrific called Accutane, acidic, just brutal stuff to try and just target the surface area of it. I was on Proactive forever, and I would have mixed results, and some of these things would sort of help, and some of them not so much. And one of the ironies about the medical system is that they do use antibiotics pretty regularly as far as something that helps you to clear up your skin, but you're simultaneously massacring your microbiome if you're on them for too long, like I was. So, microbiome health matters so much for your skin that the irony is just insane that that's one of the primary strategies that they use. I'll tell you, even with just hundreds and maybe thousands of dollars of skincare products and supplements and this and that, I didn't clear my skin up until I cut gluten out entirely. Like there was some genetic predisposition there. We have a family of genes called HLA that would suggest that I have some non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and I avoided it and avoided it. I was like, no, I bet you I can just take more probiotics. I bet you I can just fast a little longer, do more sauna, whatever it was. Until I really pulled that into alignment, I still had a pretty consistent issue with breakouts. So taking care of my gut, removing food sensitivities, supporting all of my detox pathways, right? So using like TUDCA and N-acetylcysteine and things specific to my liver, especially if you guys have elevated liver enzymes or elevated urinary bile acids, that's going to show you that you have liver congestion, and it's very likely going to start to show up in your skin, right? I mean, your skin is a detox organ. So it's as important to support your skin from the outside in as anything, but doing it from the inside out, like Dr. Varden said, that's really what's going to matter. Now I've got the breakouts pretty well under control, and so the products that I use can now just work on my skin because it's not an uphill battle anymore where I'm trying to like negate inflammatory symptoms going on there. So now I use clay masks. Like I'm a fan of a company called Alitura. They use these 4 different types of clay and grass-fed colostrum and cool stuff. I use different meteorite scrubs that actually have like meteorite in them and bamboo stem cells and different things. And then I'm a big fan of a strategy for anti-aging called microneedling. Now there's derma rolling, which is it's effective, but the needles kind of go in at a weird angle, right? So it actually causes a little more damage than is necessary. But microneedling, they go straight in and out. So you can use some of these different systems to really help rehabilitate your skin if you have scarring, like I have a bit. And so that's really cool. Microneedling, red light therapy, masks. I mean, now I've got a whole plethora of stuff to rehab the years of damage that was done from acne. So if anyone in the audience resonates, check out those things. They can help you a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're talking about acne, talking about, these other things, absolutely the microbiome, your gut health is going to impact that because it can also affect eczema, psoriasis, these other autoimmune type issues, but also just your hormones. Women who and men who tend to be more androgenetic, um, they can have more cystic acne. They can have some other issues when it comes to skin health and the way that it looks. So knowing your hormones, your hormone profile, can be a tremendous influence and help guide how you go about taking care of your skin, taking care of yourself from the inside out. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's some great information that you shared with us, and I really appreciate you doing that. Can we have the next slide, please? So I've already mentioned about healthy foods not being universally healthy. But here I want to mention about people who are aging. Our bodies, they tolerate errors, okay? Much easier when we're younger. Not so great as we get older, definitely less efficiently. What your 30-year-old mitochondria and detox systems could buffer may show up as visible aging, metabolic slowdown, or even sleep disruption 50, 60, 70, especially if your nutrition does not evolve with your biology. If you do not know how to efficiently support your detox pathways, if you happen to be uh, toxins, if you are exposed to toxins that maybe you hadn't thought about, like EMFs or uh, pesticides, or, if depending where you work, are you being exposed to other toxins? Okay. Where you sleep. Do you sleep on a bed that is giving you dirty electricity, or you're sleeping next to a wall that has a bunch of wires and Wi-Fi is right there, and you're getting all of this toxic impact? That is going to affect your skin ultimately. It certainly is going to affect your sleep. And I know that's something that a lot of you had mentioned in the poll, how sleep could be a little more elusive, how it's one of the more difficult things to keep consistent. Well, when you start removing these burdens from your body, your sleep will improve. So it is when you sleep that your body does the majority of repair. The gut is doing the cleanup and repair. And I'm sure that many people have heard, when you haven't gotten a good night's sleep, they look at you, they go, "Oh, you look tired." It's kind of like, AKA, you look like shit. But the thing is that, yeah, because you probably didn't get very good sleep. But when you are well rested, you tend to glow more, you look better. So sleep is extremely important when it comes to skin health, body health, overall health.
Yeah, and for blood sugar management, I mean,
Mhm.
hormonal regulation, right? I mean, most people, when you don't sleep well, your cortisol goes way up, and then your sex hormones go way down, and your body ends up in this catabolic state. That's my least favorite thing is when you know that you didn't sleep well and you already don't feel good, and then you go to work or whatever, and everyone's like, "Oh, wow, you sure look tired." And you're like, "I'm aware. Thank you so much." Like, it's just one of those things that just
Thanks.
rubs it in that much further. But yeah, I mean, we've got a bunch of genes relative to that as well, right? I mean, the legacy genes that we've talked about, like clock,
Mhm.
are there. The dopamine pathway matters there. The anxiety pathway matters there. And then we've got, in the new genes, like I mentioned as well, we've got things that impact like PM insulin spiking, and there's things that are really there for like the melatonin receptors as well. So if you're still struggling with your sleep and all you have is the legacy genes, you may want to look at the upgrade, because we've got even more in that pathway that can kind of just dive deeper and show you even further and give you more detail as to what's going on with your biology.
Yeah, because we've added a lot more genes for sleep. Again, Justin had mentioned the clock gene. We also have the cry1 gene, the PER genes, two, threes. And these really give a much more enriched picture of that beautiful dance of sleep, that push pull. It can give you insight into how are you, the type of sleeper you are. And I'm saying, as far as like, an early bird, are you, is it shifted more later? How is that working? And by knowing these things, you can work with your DNA, you can work with your biology. You don't want to work against it, because when you are working against your DNA, your natural biology, it's like constantly climbing up a hill with a heavy sack on your back. Okay. If you can adjust according to your DNA, then it just makes life so much easier. You can be more productive. You can feel better. And that's the kind of information that you can gain by, especially getting our new test. So, because it does give you all of these new genes to be able to take a look at. All right, let's move to the next slide, please. So here we're
Longevity
talking,
stress. Sorry,
yeah,
I was just going to read what
no,
the
please.
title is. Longevity, stress, and visible aging, right? So the way that it actually shows up. And, stress is an interesting term here, right? Because like we've talked about things like exercise, which are beneficial stress and hormetic stress. But I think that the totality of the stress load on your body is what really contributes to the aging equation. So that's where all of the genes we talk about matter, because some of them are associated with oxidative stress. Well, that's stress. If you have liver congestion because you don't glutathionize well, that's a stress. All of these things can actually trigger the HPA axis and cause your body to just have that never ending trickle of inflammation and stress and immune activation. And that's going to cause your cells to age a lot more at accelerated pace.
Yeah, and the nice thing is with the new genes, we have expanded and are actually looking and focused. One of our assessments is an HPA axis pattern, and that is in the mood and behavior reports. So we've added genes like FKBP5. Now, these genes, there's actually 3 of these genes that mark a stress sensitive pattern of regulation. And the risk variance can actually weaken the brain's ability to shut off the stress hormone, that HPA axis, when it gets challenged, when you are in a situation that creates stress. And, this is really important, especially in the context of early life adversity. If you've ever taken or have heard of the ACEs, adverse childhood events, this is where it can really impact the traumas you've had as a child and how they can be reflected in that HPA axis, that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, okay, for that stress. And it can increase the vulnerability to anxiety, depression, PTSD like symptoms. So if you've been having issues, it's not that there's something wrong with you. Maybe looking at your genes, you can take a look and go, oh, okay, so that's why, I'm still having some problems. And that way you and your practitioner can dive in and focus on that to be able to heal that. Because, a great mentor of mine told me the issues are in the tissues. And we tend to hold on to those issues, especially if they're not dealt with. And it will show up as some pathophysiological manifestation of dis-ease. So by knowing that, it just really helps to empower you to then take the steps to go, this is where I need to focus right now. We'll get through that. We'll move to the next step of healing and of optimization for longevity.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that the new reports are focusing a lot on the HPA axis because,
Hmm.
like traditionally, right? So our legacy reports were already pretty robust, but they were
Mhm.
focused on dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline, and BDNF, all of which are very important. But I really think that all disease states, I mean, most of them, right? They're going to start with stress and too much stress. So when the HPA axis is initiated really easily, which there's genetic components there, or not shut down easily, which is what Dr. Laura was just saying, it makes it so that our HPA axis is overactive all the time. And that can really mess with downstream hormones, right? When your HPA axis gets kicked into high gear easily and doesn't shut down very easily, you're going to be more cortisol dominant for a longer period of time. The longer that you're cortisol dominant, the more that you're going to be shutting down other sex hormones. And that starts to impact other things like your gut, right? Now, we have tons of genes just about the gut, but the HPA axis and your nervous system also impacts the gut. When you're too cortisol dominant, it's going to shut down some of the defenders in your gut, like secretory IgA. Once that goes, that's a big part of your immune system, right? So the hormones from the stress, they'll impact the gut, then the gut will impact the immune system, and then the immune system will make it so that you're reactive to anything that comes your way, GI pathogens, a flu, COVID, whatever it is. And you're now susceptible only because your HPA axis was at the top of that whole food chain and being kicked off really easily and not shutting off easily either with that FK gene. So I think that the mood and behavior reports were already great, but now understanding the HPA axis way better with what we have now, yeah, that can really help to guide interventions. And it's a really good thing to know about your physiology. So I have a little mini fascination with the HPA axis, by the way. I find it just a fascinating system in the body.
Yeah, it's really amazing because with the new genes that we've included, like the NR3C1 and the CRHR1, these really give us a lot more insight into, hey, when you have cortisol release, how sensitive are your receptors to it? So how much are you going to be feeling it? How, is it going to be very strong? How long is it going to last? So there's this whole new aspect that we can take a look at. And then don't forget, we make sure that the genes that we look at are clinically relevant and actionable. So there are things that we have put in your reports that say, hey, if you're dealing with this, this is what you can do about it. This is what the literature shows that is helpful. So that way you can deal with this, even if your genes, make you more susceptible to higher cortisol levels, longer, being longer in that stressed state. So, definitely ways of working with this, that you're not broken, you have what you have, but thankfully there are things that you can do to help optimize it and make you feel better. And, when it comes to aging, they say, oh, it's just aging. And it's not, it's a bullshit. I don't have to age like that. If I pay attention and know my genes, know where I can support myself, I do the things for my body. I think aging is, that's almost a choice. I mean, granted, yes, you have your chronological age, but you're in control of your biological age. And that's something that the things that we are talking about, you control. That even though you may be, 55 years old, you don't have to look it. You don't have to feel it. You don't have to act it. If you are 75, again, that's up to you how you are going to move on that. Because, aging faster is often it's more stress related. It's more that story of stress and the cumulative stress that you have, not your chronological age. Many of the sudden changes people notice that are really cumulative effects of years of the unbuffered, undealt with stress that has been visible in their genomics and their behavior long before you looking in the mirror and seeing the results of that. So, and the nice thing is, even if you already are 55, 65, 75, there are still things that you can do to help reverse that clock.
Yeah, and I think again the prioritizing aspect of it, right? And the explaining of why something shows up the way it does. Because like, I'm sure you've had this as well, Dr. Laura, but sometimes you get people who have like blood sugar regulation issues or histamine issues or something like that. And it's difficult to explain based on what they're eating. Like I've had people that are like, and unless they were lying to me, they say that, I am literally eating like totally in alignment with my genes. So why do I have these blood sugar fluctuations? And then you recognize that, well, it may be because of cortisol, right? Like you may just have this HPA axis dysfunction in your body. It's really cortisol heavy, and the cortisol is causing your liver to release glucose because that's part of what it does. And that's where a lot of this fluctuation is coming from. Or the histamine imbalance, right? When you have a lot of cortisol because you have suboptimal HPA axis genes, it makes it so that the mast cells in your gut, right? The gut lumen has these mast cells and they create these pro-inflammatory cytokines, one of which being histamine, right? So sometimes even histamine issues can be explained by looking at the genes in the HPA axis. And beyond that, now we have genes that encode the DAO enzyme. So DAO, right, diamine oxidase, that breaks down the histamine. And some people don't have an optimal enzyme there. So that can even explain people like, what the heck? I just have this crazy histamine issue and it won't break down. And I'm getting, hives or just whatever it is, racing heart rate, all the things associated with histamine overload. And it has to do with diamine oxidase enzymes, and it has to do with HPA axis being just overstimulated and easily stimulated and not being able to shut it down properly. That's what guides the intervention. Now we know, your blood sugar isn't actually directly because of your macronutrients, it's because of your cortisol. And the HPA axis is what we need to figure out with whatever it is, adaptogens or all the different ways that we have kind of inputs to kind of regulate that system.
And, I want to mention about stress because community and mindset matter a lot. There are actually people with certain social bonding and mood related patterns. For example, oxytocin, dopamine pathways. So these are like your DRD2 gene, which we have in our legacy reports and legacy genes, and our new ones for oxytocin, which is the OXTR genes. And these really shape the oxytocin sensitive social emotional wiring. And this is really important because it often benefits, like statistically beneficial, that those people really do well with supportive environments. And that in turn can help to lower their stress expression. So this is where not just looking at the HPA axis, the genes that we have mentioned, and there's more, but also looking at, hey, where in my mood and behavior and for oxytocin and dopamine, and how does that work? Because again, they do work together. They do overlap and influence each other. There's actually the longest running study, I believe it's a Harvard study, and this is a longitudinal study of humans, that they found that the number one thing that for good health, for longevity, was social connection, strong social connections. And we're not necessarily talking about quantity, we are talking about quality. So, and there's also other research studies that have found that there are visible signs of aging, or actually long before visual signs of aging or illness. Chronic stress initially reduces mitochondrial energy capacity, which in turn lowers cellular repair capacity. And it's just like this snowball effect. So this happens well before what shows up in the mirror. So if you can take care of it now, you're set for later.
Yeah, I think oxytocin is very underrated, by the way, as far as its effect on the body and how we feel good. Like the pandemic showed us that, right? All that social distancing. I think that was one of the many, many psychologically damaging things during that time. Oxytocin, it really is important for your health. It's not just about the way you feel in that moment, but it's part of how our body kind of expresses its emotions. And I think hug your pets, get some oxytocin in there, because it is a actual longevity strategy. Once you feel that disconnect, that existential angst of purposelessness and lack of connection, I think that really starts to downgrade your feeling of needing to be here anymore. And once you decide that, I mean, there's science has shown us that the way you think and that feeling of connection and positive thoughts, it actually impacts 4,000 plus different gene expressions. Like we've actually seen that in literature. So when you start to wake up every day and feel like you're not connected to anybody and you really don't have a purpose anymore, I'm telling you, your brain is directing your body to say, well, if you don't feel like we need to be here anymore, then we don't need to be here anymore. So I think connection, oxytocin, purpose, connection to whatever your belief is in the universe, God, whatever, that is a huge variable when it comes to your body's ability to keep on trucking along. If you've got a purpose and connection, you're going to live longer. I truly believe that.
Definitely. So let's circle back and talk about some of the visible signs of aging and where that reflects. We'll kind of speak into that a little bit more. So next slide, please. So that more superficial aesthetic aspect, that we see as people age. Gray hair, okay, wrinkles, and repair capacity. That's not something you generally see per se, but we see the effects of the inability or the lack of that repair capacity, or that it's not as efficient. So, how do we see these? We see these in things like, uh, again, wrinkles, gray hair, just that tiredness look. The skin is not as supple, it's, a bit draggy. So, those things are reflective of how well is your body repairing itself. What kind of oxidative load do you have? And when I say oxidative load, I'm talking about oxidants, reactive oxygen species, which cause cellular and tissue damage if they are not broken down and cleared. This goes back to our antioxidation pathway, like SOD2, GPX, catalase. Okay, these things happen in the mitochondria, because don't forget, mitochondria makes our energy. They do a lot of other things. They can trigger inflammatory response. They can trigger mitogenesis, meaning making more of itself. They can trigger mitophagy, or the breakdown of an old worn out cell, or an old worn out mitochondria, which could then trigger autophagy of that, getting rid of an old worn out cell. So, with these things, you need to look to say, how's my base DNA blueprint? Okay, where does that need support? Because if it's not doing so well, there are things that you can do. But if you're not doing that, if your mitochondria is not doing well, it's not going to have the energy to do all that repair. So that's very, very important. And also that inflammatory burden. And that gets back to what we were talking about. What kind of toxic load do you have externally? What about internally? Justin was talking about earlier about supporting the liver, looking at your liver enzymes, at those. And this is on a regular CMP, okay, a comprehensive metabolic panel, blood panel. So you're looking at your alkaline phosphatase, your AST, ALT. These are markers for liver health. Also, just answering some questions that your practitioner might have, to help support your liver for those detoxification processes. Because when we're talking about longevity, inflammation, the reports that we have in our DNA 360, they really help us to understand why people show gray hair, wrinkles, joint discomfort earlier, while others maintain a more youthful appearance and function longer despite similar lifestyles. So, did you have anything to add about that, Justin?
Yeah, there's a few kind of points to make here. Like when it comes to the oxidative load, that's got a lot to do with like prematurely graying hair or whiting hair, because it has to do with this buildup of hydrogen peroxide in the cells, right? So again, with that SOD2 pathway, there's SOD2 and there's GPX. That's how we look at the antioxidative efficiency of your mitochondria. And when those are out of balance, there's a buildup of an intermediate chemical in the middle, being that hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide bleaches things, right? So it starts to show up in your hair. Another interesting part there is that, if you have, let's say, suboptimal SLC30A8, which is something that we look at for fasting glucose, but also it's a primary transporter of zinc in the body. It means that you got to have quite a bit of zinc intake in order for it to actually do its job. But zinc and copper, they compete, right, for the same receptors. So when you take in a whole bunch of zinc, because you don't have good zinc transport genes, now you're kind of pushing out copper. And you need copper in order to keep your hair from turning white. So this is one of those things where knowing the genes can help you guide those interventions. Like I have suboptimal SLC30A8, so I have a decent amount of zinc intake, but then I also cycle on and off of this GHK copper peptide, and I also utilize topical copper peptide, right? Because that gives the hair what it needs. And then beyond that, it's all about the clearance of free radicals in the mitochondria, right? Getting better pro versus antioxidative balance in the mitochondria, that helps to support that graying of the hair. I think oxidative stress shows up in the skin as well, right? It's like, you cut an apple in the morning, and if you go to eat it in the evening, it's oxidized, right? It certainly looks a lot older, and that's what happens to oils and all kinds of things that we eat. If it starts to oxidize, it looks different. It just looks less healthy. When we have a lot of that oxidative burden, it's like marathon runners or people who really train a heck of a lot that don't have good SOD2 function. They end up accelerating their aging, like I said earlier. So finding little strategies and ways to clear that faster is really important. And by the way, repair efficiency, oxidative load are inflammatory burden, right?
Mm-hmm.
That third choice there,
Absolutely.
inflammatory burden, that's actually part of, it's like an overarching principle in both of the above. If you're not repairing properly, and if you don't have a good oxidative stress clearance, then it's going to create more inflammation in the body. So inflammation, again, is one of the main things that we talk about and need to target with our strategies.
Yeah, and actually, there's some research that has shown how metabolic and inflammatory stress depletes regenerative stem cell capacity, and it accelerates visible aging phenotypes such as hair thinning and impaired tissue repair. And actually, I mean, okay, obviously, I'm gray. Okay, I don't color my hair. This is the natural color. My genetics and my antioxidation pathway actually are optimal. With my estrogen and my sex hormone profile, I should, if we were just looking at DNA, I should have still, dark hair, nice and thick and everything else. So you're probably going, well, then why are you all gray? That's because of external situations that happened to me, being in a severe car accident. That is a huge trauma. Having two open back surgeries, with the anesthesia and all of the medications, being on heavy medications for 14 years. That is a tremendous amount of stress. That in itself, not to mention the mental, the depressive, situations that went along with that, my body was completely inflamed. And how did that show up? It made my hair gray. So it's not just about your DNA, it's about your life, your history. What happened to you? What is your story? Now, obviously, there are things that I'm doing now to help support my body, to help recover from, those years of trauma and inflammation and, all of those things. So I'm getting back, my hair is thicker. I mean, I doubt it's going to go dark again, but that's okay. I like it gray. But my skin is better, all of these different things. So, you can do some reversal in that, but you have to also keep in mind your history. What have you gone through? And that's a part of you. So, it's very important that you look at that and the fact that, when you have these signs of aging, you have to think of it as feedback, not failure. The longevity and inflammation detox assessments that we have in our reports, it turns that feedback into a roadmap for where to support repair first. And that's what I did.
Yeah, and the more of these strategies, I mean, it's really, to your point, I mean, we only control the epigenetics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, try not to beat yourself up too much, but I mean, what you can do is you can use the genes to understand your weak points. You can bounce it off your lifestyle to understand what you've done to perhaps amplify some of the negative characteristics of your genes. And then you can alter it to make sure that you're providing different inputs to get higher quality gene expression. And remember, everything all the way up to positive versus negative thoughts is an epigenetic factor. If you start to introduce new things, what's going to happen is your genome is going to start to recognize this new input that you just gave it. And over time, if you continue to provide that new input, it's going to create a new what's called methylation pattern, right? So your body is going to start to integrate this new information into the methylome, and it's going to alter your phenotype, which is what your actual body shows up as and presents as. So I'm obsessed with this idea, right? This relationship between genes, epigenetics, how it all interacts in the genome and creates a different result. And you're just building something new all the time. Your cells are consistently replacing themselves, right? So use that fact as kind of an encouragement tool and just say, all right, if I start introducing new information and I start getting rid of some old crappy information, things are going to start to methylate differently, and my phenotype will be higher quality than it would have been otherwise.
Can we have the next slide, please? So we've covered much of this already. So we'll briefly go through it though. When we're talking about detox skincare products and why they can backfire, thankfully, the majority of you did not have adverse effects from using products like we asked in our poll, but there was a handful of you that it did. So when we're talking about skincare, it does not work in isolation. Your ability to tolerate and benefit from even clean skincare products depends on your underlying detoxification, histamine, your barrier integrity profile. Okay, your skin is a barrier. Okay, to outside pathogens, to the bacteria that lives on your skin, to any opportunistic bacteria or viruses or anything like that. So we see these in our inflammation and detox reports. And it really is that if your detox capacity is limited, for example, your phase 1 or phase 2 enzyme patterns, and this would be your CYP genes, like the genes that have CYP, that's part of the cytochrome P450 family. That's in the phase 1 detoxification pathway. Also, our GSTs, these have to deal with our glutathione synthesis and glutathione conjugation pathway. The UGT genes, this is part of our glucuronidation pathway, and also histamine DAO tendencies, like what Justin was talking about earlier. It's really a matter of, hey, these inform us about how products that you use, possible toxins or chemicals, your body may not be able to process out, so they will accumulate. It could increase inflammation. It could accelerate the aging process. And we need to be aware that any science-backed ingredients can still harm you if they are not efficiently cleared. This is where your DNA-based insight into detox, histamine clearance, it really helps us to individualize product selection and frequency of use. So, honestly, it's when we're talking about aging, we will circle back and say, hey, it really starts from the inside out, not at the bathroom counter, not at the store purchasing stuff, off the shelves. Skincare is an extension of your liver, of your gut, and mitochondrial health, like we've been talking about, all of which are reflected in our reports, whether it be the anti-inflammation report, diet nutrition assessments, all of these things that can really start giving you insights into knowledge about yourself and where you need to start focusing on your first step or your next step.
Nailed it. I have things to add, but I know that we want to get to our Q&A, so perhaps we just get to the next slide. Lovely. So this is it. This is where we kind of cover what was previously covered as far as some of the newer genes that we touched on tonight. So TCF7L2, right, that insulin response gene, that has always been in our legacy reports. But the other two that we mentioned, the MTNR and the ApoA5, if you remember, that's the triglyceride conversion. That is in the upgraded DNA 360. So this is where you get those, as well as the other ones that we mentioned. Dr. Laura and I both kind of went off tonight on some of the new genes. And the upgraded one has, by the way, all of the legacy genes as well as the new ones. So it's covering the works.
All right. And our last slide, we do have some discount codes for a 10% off our DNA 360 test. Use code sexy at 80. And then we also have for our Black Label supplements, we have a 3 for 2 sale going on. So when you go in, just choose the three of the products that you want, type in code 3 for 2, and then you'll get that price change at checkout. So I say thank you very much, Nessa and Vanny, for helping us out in the background with the slides and with taking such great care for this part of the webinar. And let's move on to questions. All right. So our first question is from Allison, and she's asking how to navigate this with long COVID. She's not gotten much guidance along those lines and would really appreciate any insights, please.
I believe that there was a full webinar about navigating long COVID, if I recall. I believe it was with Dr. Boyce Burkle, and they did cover that pretty nicely as well. Um, I think that really a lot of it boils down to the management of the inflammation load and improving detoxification capacity, mitochondrial detoxification, and just understanding that you need to shore up things like your vitamin D profile, which we have a pretty robust report about, improving methylation, improving, all of the different things that we talk about regarding blood sugar management and inflammation that's associated with it. So I think that those are some of the kind of levers that you can pull. Dr. Laura, do you have any like biohacking magic or anything that you kind of implement for this?
Yeah, I'd say, long COVID really changes the rules a bit. And I want to acknowledge that what you are experiencing is real. All right. Um, your mitochondria and nervous system may still be recovering, and doing too much too fast can actually flare symptoms for days afterward rather than help. So I would say stay focused on very gentle, symptom informed pacing. You want short, manageable activity with lots of rest, low risk foundations you want to focus on, things like anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense foods, good sleep, hydration, nervous system regulation, instead of trying to boot camp your way back to health. Any bigger changes to exercise or diet really need to be done in partnership with a clinician who understands long COVID. So we want to make sure that you are supporting your healing rather than accidentally overloading the system. And we have worked with several clients with long COVID and have had very beneficial results. So your DNA will actually inform us holistically, all those different aspects to see where you are genetically and then where it can be tweaked based on symptoms, based on what's been going on. So I do really appreciate that information. So thank you. All right. Let's see. Our next question is from Janet, and she's asking, how do you feel about taking melatonin if you have GGMTNR1B homozygous, as far as raising your blood sugar? And then she gets into some information about, what she happens to take and everything else. So all right. Uh, did you have any information about melatonin, sleep, and blood sugar?
Yeah, I've got some opinions on it. To me, taking melatonin is typically not my first line of defense there. Melatonin supplementation is generally only something that I recommend if you're traveling or, trying to adjust new time zones, or, the time changes coming up, right? It can help you to kind of transition to the new time. But generally, I would say that melatonin, I recommend taking care of your gut, because that's where a lot of your melatonin is made. There's actually 400 times the amount of melatonin made in the GI tract than there is in the pineal gland. Serotonin is another really important consideration there, because serotonin converts to melatonin. So looking at your serotonin receptor and having serotonergic strategies, right? So using 5-HTP can be valuable there. Tryptophan and some of these precursors, or even utilizing like the carb backloading trick that I've mentioned on here as well, where you kind of eat low carb and higher fat throughout the day and then just spike your glucose on purpose at night, because that little boost of carbs can actually help to improve serotonin. So little strategies like that. Your sleep environment matters a lot. And with regard to the glucose regulation, I think that if you have the last meal of the day, make sure that you've got like some a decent chunk of protein there, and follow it up with maybe some apple cider vinegar or something that helps to clear the blood glucose. That can be really valuable as well. Beyond that, it would be nighttime cortisol spikes or something I would definitely make sure that you don't have. So having the dorky red glasses, and just making sure that you're not exposed to blue light, toxic social media, inflammatory news lines. All of that can help a lot. If it remains to be a problem, though, a coaching session is likely in your interest, because then we can look at all of your genes, right, and understand what your starch response, your fat response, your methylation, liver detoxification, all of the above.
Yeah, and really, in people with the MTNR1B and TCF7L2, the patterns like you're describing, really the bigger picture is in that the system is already a little more prone to higher fasting glucose. So, not saying that it is, because obviously we don't have your labs, we don't know your history or anything, but in general, we would pay extra attention to evening habits. Okay. Most of the concern with melatonin and blood sugar is when melatonin is high at the same time you're eating, because that can actually blunt insulin. A low dose at true bedtime away from food is generally considered less concerning, but it's still something to review with your clinician, especially, depending on your A1C, which you had mentioned. So that way, that clinician can decide if dose or timing tweaks make sense for you. And your DNA can inform us, not just the DNA, but your history, your symptoms, all of the things that we do when we see clients, when you are in one of our programs, because there's more to it than just, hey, here's a couple blood markers, levels, and here's a couple of the the genotypes of a couple of genes. So yeah, definitely, that would be very good to see someone, especially someone, one of our practitioners, that can help walk you through that a little bit better. All right. So our next question is from Allison, and she says, who can I schedule a one-on-one appointment with for my daughter who has PCOS and potentially EDS? She suffers with severe acne and no doctor has been able to help. I would say please contact our team. We'll put the link in the chat, and you can talk to one of our specialists who can guide to see what kind of program would be best for your daughter, because yes, we do deal with those things. And yes, there are things we can do to help her. I have worked with females with PCOS, with severe acne. Justin, I know you have too. So, definitely we can do that. So if Fanny or Nessa, if you can please put in the chat away the link that she can reach out, that would be absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and then while you're at it, Anne has a question saying, please tell me where to view the replays. Anne, I would say that our YouTube channel is definitely a great resource there, because YouTube is it's always up there and you can go through. We have like shorts and we have our videos, and then the full length webinars are there as well. So again, Vanny or Nessa, in the chat, if you wouldn't mind also putting our YouTube link just to our company channel, then anybody who wants to review these replays, you can go on the channel and check that out.
Also, I highly recommend downloading our app, The DNA Way, because we have all of our past webinars right available in the app. You can sign up for upcoming webinars. You can watch past webinars. You can listen to our podcast. You can read our DNA Talks Digest. All of this information all in one place, The DNA Way. And that's available on Apple as well as Android. Actually, our wonderful ladies have put links in the chat for everyone. So that really is a fantastic one-stop shop. Not to mention that you can actually take a look at your DNA 360 reports right within the app, and it will give you information. It'll give you action items. It will give you, wonderful educational information as well. Again, all in that app. All right.
So Lynn has the next question and says, my issue in quotation marks here, is over exercising her whole life. Lynn is 66 years old and still runs 7 days a week. Wow. 5 to 8 miles a day. That's incredible, Lynn. Does weights 5 days a week as well, and teaches yoga and Pilates at least once a day. So that's unbelievable. You got way more energy than me, Lynn. My whole morning is exercising, and she does have 5G for 9p21. So, audience, if you're not familiar, 9p21 is a chromosomal locus that we check, and the higher Gs that you have, 5G would be in the higher category. It lends itself to thinner and more at-risk endothelium and blood vessels. And she also has suboptimal SOD2, which is what we mentioned before with regard to free radical clearance in the mitochondria. So she's basically asking, would you recommend doing less running, and saying that she did stop doing the marathons and triathlons, which are like a 10-hour long race, years ago, but overall feels healthy and does well. So, Lynn, what I would say is that you've likely got other genes and things that are working in your favor regarding, inflammation and things along those lines. My recommendation would be, therefore, primarily based on what makes you happy. And if you want to continue to do what you do and you feel healthy and your markers are good, then I'm not going to tell you not to. But what I would say is that 5G in the 9p21 can be a little bit sneaky, right? It can be just the totality of the inflammation load over a lifetime. And what we don't want is any surprises there, any cardiovascular events to come up just because the lifestyle is out of alignment with your assignment. So my advice there would be to perhaps, instead of doing the run, maybe substitute a couple of those runs for just a walk, right? It's high volume, but it's lower intensity cardio. You're going to be making less free radicals. You still get the fresh air and the time outside. You'll get the same endorphins, but there will be less inflammation at the level of the blood vessels, and you'll have less free radical creation in the mitochondria as well. I mean, you do yoga and all kinds of great things as well to stimulate parasympathetic activity. And I think that a slight adjustment there can be valuable for your longevity. If not, what I would say is that just accelerating free radical clearance and anti-inflammatory strategies, right? So like you could do perhaps like hydrogen water pre and post run. That helps to clear those free radicals faster. Doing some post-run sauna, red light therapy, grounding after you run. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can downgrade that inflammation. Improving nitric oxide is valuable there as well, right? So like you can utilize agmatine sulfate, arginine, citrulline, beetroot extract, watermelon extract. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. And I think that the more that you address healing and strengthening your endothelium, that's what's going to help to kind of prevent any kind of a nasty surprise later on in life. You're disciplined and you're doing a fantastic job, but that would be my recommendation, would be to balance out that with a little bit more anabolic workouts than catabolic workouts. I think that your physiology will thank you in the long run.
Excellent. Thank you for that wonderful answer. All right, I'll grab Susan's question, and she is asking, is there a gene associated with a need for more omega-3s? And is there a gene associated with either an increased absorption ability of omega-3s or a decreased absorption ability of omega-6s? And the fact is that yes, there are genes that change how much omega-3 you tend to need. The main ones we look at are called FADS1 and FADS2. I mentioned these earlier in this webinar. And In simple terms, these genes act like the body's conversion enzymes that try to turn plant omega-3s like flax, chia, okay, the ALAs, into active forms your cells really use. That's EPA, DHA. So when someone has certain versions of the FADS1 or 2, that conversion step runs more slowly. So they usually do better getting EPA or DHA directly from like fish, algae oil, or some high quality omega-3 supplement instead of relying only on plant sources. And the same genes also control how your body converts basic omega-6 fats from things like seed oils into more active omega-6s, such as arachidonic acid, which can actually drive inflammation when they're too high. So the FADS genes, those are less about how well you absorb fats from the gut and more about how efficiently you process and activate both omega-3 and omega-6 once they're already in the body. All right.
All right. So Allison has the next question here asking, is there a link for us to order the new gene testing? And there is one. Yeah. So what we mentioned there, so these codes come and go, right? Promotions, they'll be there for 1 month and the next month may be something different. The one that we're currently using for listeners of tonight's webinar is sexy at 80. And that would be at the checkout. And that gives you 10% off of the DNA 360. And reminder as well, we've also got the Black Label supplements. Those are 3 for 2 at checkout as well on our website.
Right. So I think our next question is from Kathy, and she's asking, there's so much talk about mitochondria lately. What genomics are involved and what can you do to improve? And there are so many, and we have already spoken about some very quickly. First of all, mitochondria, they are your cellular power plants. I've talked about this, all the different things that they can do. They basically turn food and oxygen into ATP, but they also create exhaust, like oxidative stress. Okay. That's where the SOD2, catalase, GPX, those genes of the anti-oxidation pathway come in. Also, the GCLC and GCLM genes, these control how well you can make glutathione. These are the glutathione synthesis genes, your master intercellular antioxidant, and that protects mitochondrial membrane, DNA, proteins. There's also the UCP1 gene and related uncoupling proteins. That's actually what it stands for, which live in the mitochondrial membrane and influence how efficiently you burn fuel versus give off heat. And this really ties into thermogenesis, metabolic flexibility, and even insulin sensitivity. So, as far as ways to improve this, very quickly, move more regularly. All right. You really want a mix of low intensity aerobic exercise, along with some interval strength training, resistance exercises. Also, you want to feed your mitochondria very high nutrient, whole foods, colorful plants. You want those polyphenols, these antioxidants, because you need to make sure you've got adequate protein for repair, healthy fats, different things like this. Trying to think anything else. Of course, good sleep, stress management, all the things that we have been talking about throughout this webinar. This is really important because your genes set up how sturdy your mitochondria engines are and how good your built-in antioxidant brakes are. Your lifestyle really determines whether you're redlining those engines all day or giving them the right fuel, tune-ups, and recovery time. All
Well
right.
said. I think Gil has the next one. Gil says, I'm 66 and I have really good energy during the day, but I feel like I have more wrinkles and skin sagging as well as gray hair than I should. I don't have great glutathione genes, but why is my energy so much better than most people my age? So interesting question, right? And this is where we zoom out, as I like to say, and we look at the genes in their totality, right? Because there are genes that are associated with detoxification and antioxidation and things, but energy production is it's also reliant on micronutrients and insulin response, and your even your mood and behavior genes matter a lot there. So sometimes we have this mixed bag, right? And we have some that are working in our favor and some that are not working in our favor. And the way that they show up in our phenotype is that I've got these symptoms and these issues showing up, but I actually feel really good. And that's just due to the complexity of physiology and the different kind of movers that are at play. If you have more graying hair and sagging skin and things like that, that can be due to the depletions of glutathione or the poor antioxidation that you have. But you may have a bunch of other things going well for you. So it's like you may have great vitamin C transport, vitamin D transport. You may have optimal gut health genetics, optimal dopamine genetics, where your drive and your reward systems are perfectly intact. All of those things manifest as the way you feel and the way you show up in the world. So my advice is to focus on the things that you can work on to improve. Take the things that are going in your favor and be happy about them, and just say that it's a significant blessing to have a lot of energy, but there's things that you can do to upregulate glutathione pathways in some of the suboptimal areas. So the energy levels are can be explained by things that are going in your favor. ATP generation is there even if you don't have good glutathione conjugation pathways and things.
Excellent. Okay. So our last question for the night is from Norma, and I really want to answer this because I think it's great. And she's asking, what's the difference between omega-3s, fish oil, fatty 15? Do we need all of these? And, this is really important because, first of all, omega-3s, it's a big family name for certain healthy fats like EPA, DHA, that our bodies use to cool that inflammation, to support heart, to nourish the brain. Okay. Fish oil is simply one way of delivering those omega-3s. All right. Usually it's in the form of EPA and DHA concentrated from fatty fish. So you can think of fish oil as that vehicle for EPA, DHA as the actual active passengers that are doing the work. Fatty 15 is something different. It is a purified form of carbon 15. It's an odd chained saturated fat, not an omega-3. And, there actually has been some wonderful data that shows how it can strengthen cell membranes. It acts on metabolic and inflammatory pathways in ways that look more like cell stability, healthy aging, heart health. I mean, there's some wonderful research out there. I'll be transparent. I take it myself. I have no affiliation. I just like it. I like the research on it, and I feel wonderful taking it. Do we need all of them? Everyone needs some omega-3s for basic health. Absolutely, hands down. Whether from food or a supplement, fish oil, again, is just one of the most efficient ways of getting the EPA and DHA, especially if your diet is low. Fatty 15, very promising, very good, but is it an absolute necessary? Not necessarily. But it depends. Is this something that you want? What are you looking to get out of it? You can have it in your stack. It certainly wouldn't hurt. So, but yeah, definitely. I think these are great questions. And I do want to say thank you, everyone, for sticking around, for asking such superb questions. We really hope that you are liking this platform, this format that we're doing with the slides. We'll keep doing that if you find them helpful. If you find, that it's a little bit easier to follow, especially with all the genes and new genes that we're talking about, we're definitely here to give you what you want, to educate you and to have you be more empowered, so that way you can live to be hot until, and beyond 80 years old.
Yeah, so thank you guys for showing up. I mean, we really try to make these as well done presentations as humanly possible. So I hope that you guys learned a little something and continue to do that. Dr. Laura and I will be back tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about longevity supplements. So make sure that you stay tuned and show up for that one. You guys keep showing up, and we will do the same for you.
So, with that, we say thank you. Have a beautiful night, and we will see you tomorrow.
See
Take
you
care,
tomorrow.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.